Okay, well, I don't think we'll wait on Keith all evening. Hopefully he'll join us quickly or shortly, I should say. So I will call to order this regular monthly meeting of the Village of Trumansburg Board of Trustees. This is our first meeting of the month for September. Do we have any changes to the agenda? Any additions, deletions?
I do actually have that request from Joel for office supplies. It's going to maybe get into the $5,000 range, so that should probably go.
Keith? Should probably start the. How's the sound, Keith?
Good.
Good. Okay. Any other additions or? Oh, it's Truman. I thought that was Truman for a second. Any other changes to the agenda? All right, then hearing none, warned you about turnout. Item number 3 on our agenda is the New York Forward Grant Application Community Workshop. So I'll give just a little bit of brief background. The New York State puts together a lot of grant opportunities every year. This one is slightly new in the fact that it is geared towards smaller communities. So they're calling it New York Forward, and it's specifically grant money that's been allocated for smaller municipalities, smaller communities that have projects that they would like to apply for that have some relevance to economic development, whether it's very broadly, economic development in the broadest sense. So a lot of your regional economic development grants annually tend to be very large in scale, and there needs to be a fairly large scope to it. This one will allow for smaller things if we can articulate that it has some benefit to the municipality, particularly their downtown center, their downtown core, and the businesses and the economy that those businesses might drive. So one of the obvious potential item that I thought of to apply for is, we've talked for years about the need for sidewalk along West Main Street from the Farmers Market to Seneca Road. Of course, now that the mobile home and manufactured home park is owned by a local not-for-profit and not a private entity, that makes things somewhat interesting from a public-private partnership kind of perspective. And so that was when I spoke to MRB about it. That was kind of my focus. Is there could be some things happening up in that corner of the village over the next few years. We've always known that sidewalk was needed there, but particularly now, can we possibly get that funded through this grant? And so that is kind of the direction we're moving. Part of the grant application requirements are that we have a community workshop where we outline what the grant is, what we are looking at, and then also solicit feedback from the community for any other ideas that the community might have with respect to how we might, or what we might apply for. Again, under this umbrella of kind of economic development for the village. The downside is the application deadline is 30th. So we have about, unlike the CFA grants and some of the other state grants that have a multi-month application cycle, this one had a multi-week application cycle. And so here we are. Otherwise, we would have had more time to publicize and try to get more folks to come to the meeting and weigh in. And so with that being said, if there's questions from the board or anyone in attendance, feel free to ask. Otherwise, I'll consider this kind of an open floor moment for we have one member of the public online via Zoom and one member of the public with us in person. If there are things that you think of that you feel would be of benefit to the village, of a large enough ticket item, that we wouldn't want to just allocate it in a budget line. I think looking at the $4.5 to $5 million range for total requested funding. The sidewalk from Farmers Market to Seneca Road, and I'm pulling a number out of the sky, but it's probably going to be in the $2-ish million range. So that leaves some room. That leaves some wiggle room. I don't know what happens if we apply for less. But I'll open it up now and see if Renee online or Jerry, if you have any questions or input. This is our opportunity to discuss it.
Sorry, so
Even better.
there's another grant on the 30th. I have a question.
Yeah.
So if we applied for the 4 to 5 million and say our focus was to put those sidewalks up to Seneca Road, could we leverage that with being able to put sidewalks somewhere else too, to get to that grant dollar?
Potentially.
Okay,
I think it all depends on how well we articulate in the grant. And MRB is helping us with the writing of it. How well we articulate in that grant, kind of the how it fits into this kind of economic development piece.
because I know I've always had a concern about the slate sidewalks that lead up to Juniper Manor, and we do have a lot of elderly people that need to walk to town, and that can often be very difficult, or we find them walking in the road because that sidewalk is very difficult to navigate when, perhaps if you have a walker or something with wheels on it. So I was just thinking that that might be a possibility or an option to consider as well.
Okay. Renee, you had unmuted. Did you have? Yeah, great. Renee, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm not totally clear on what the grant covers or what it will and what it won't, but certainly in community areas, you referenced the trailer park and the sidewalk going up there. I know as a driver of an electric vehicle, I find great value in plugging in at the town hall. But I also have a great deal of frustration plugging in at the town hall because it is a level 2 charger. And it from time to time is not in service or both ports are in use. So certainly as more of us transition to EVs, there is a growing need for access to charging stations. I think the village could benefit greatly. In fact, I remember one time during grassroots, the chargers were constantly in use and people were glad they were there. It was like really, really happy for them that was part of our community. I think the village could greatly benefit. You mentioned that economic growth is or the economics of this is one of the things that the grant is asking for. So I believe that having charging stations is a draw. The apps that I use to find where I can charge on a trip draw me to those places where I can charge. I'm there for an amount of time while my car charges and I go spend money. So I visit Brattleboro or I visit Albany or I visit, Bennington or Portland. And when I plug in, I frequent the businesses near there. So to look at places like the village lot next to the laundromat, or perhaps a collaboration with Atlas, I would even venture to say that putting charging stations in the vicinity of the trailer park would be really beneficial. I think we're definitely as a society in that juggle of which comes first. Well, I can't charge my car anywhere. Why am I going to get an electric vehicle? And so that populating areas with charging stations, I think, is a really critical way to go. I think there are also opportunities, well, I hope there are opportunities in this grant to help more people achieve renewable energy improvements in their own living situation.
Great. We do have a representative from MRB here. Sorry for not letting you introduce yourself at the front end, but if you'd like to just introduce yourself to the board, and then I actually want Ben to talk about the EV charging stations, because Renee, we do actually have 2 separate grant funding pieces we're going after on that respect.
Well, it's 2 funding sources, but it's the same.
Okay. Project. Right. So you can bring us up to speed on that in a moment.
So I'm Tracy Barrier. I'm a senior economic analyst with MRP Group. I'm helping out with some of the grant writing for the New York Forward Grant and various other grants that come about. And Rhonda is online as well. She's our Smarter Local Gov manager that does a lot of the grant work and oversees a lot of the grant work. This particular opportunity is really focused on downtown revitalization. So familiar with the Downtown Revitalization Initiative, DRI, kind of the same concept. So we're going to be looking for both the public projects like walkability, sidewalks, parks, streetscaping, basically enhancing quality of life, walkability, the experience for tourism. And we are really hoping to mix that with private sector projects. So that might be building renovation or business support of some sort. A lot of DRIs have to be involved, so I'm sure that will show up in the year forward as well. But competitive applications are going to have a mix of public and private projects. So that's one thing that we'll kind of put out there to the public and the universe of if there's private projects to be had in the village, private property owners in the downtown area looking to do any work on their facilities. This would be a good opportunity for that. It's fairly flexible funding, although no free money is free. There's always requirements and regulations to follow, but at the end of the day, it's a good opportunity to make a project happen, either activating second stories or
Plan First Technologies.
historic preservation.
Logged in as Hornets-Trumansburg-New York.
Sorry.
You're funny. This has happened to me before. So yes, that's what we're working on with this, and it's going to be good to supplement the sidewalk project with some different types of projects to show a comprehensive approach. Although it seems like you have a very nice downtown already, so that's what we're looking to do is to say, okay, here's the tipping point. We're doing great. We've got some great things happening in the village, and these sidewalks and a few other projects are really going to put us over the edge and make us the top-notch community that we know we are, but we want to show that to everybody else. And another key of the program is they're looking for compact areas. So we want to make sure that you have a number of projects that are kind of walkable, 10-minute walking distance, like I think is generally what they're aiming for. So that's something to keep in mind.
I'm going to share online, and I should be able to see it on screen. Part of the application is the requirement to develop kind of a vision statement of why we're applying, what we're applying for. So this is the taking from the vision statement and the community goals from the comp plan. The kind of the draft statement here at the bottom for our application, which I think we should all be able to read that. So I won't bother reading it out loud, and it's shared online as well.
So these are three kind of options that were developed, and just looking for some direction as to which resonates.
So this will be part of what we're looking for in terms of feedback this evening, which of those three best.
Are there limitations in terms of the numbers of activities? Like, could you do, 5,000 things that all cost $10 or something? Or is it like you only have to sort of narrow the focus?
So I think the biggest limitation is there's a page limit in the
Right.
application.
Okay, fair enough.
And, generally speaking, I think we're probably, and Rhonda, you want to jump in here, I think we're probably looking for 5 to 10 projects max. And we're going to fit it in. So the key here is to be transformative. So $1,000, $10 things aren't necessarily moving to.
Right. Yeah, no, hyperbolic intent.
Yes.
There's one thing that
I buy intents for everybody.
even what if they say Village of Trumansburg? So one thing that I would consider is like a historic preservation fund that can be applied, particularly for the downtown corridor. The facades on all of those buildings I see as being immensely expensive to upkeep, right? Like the Masonic Temple, I don't imagine they have the budget freely floating to just sort of say, let's redo all of this. Obviously, the church does sort of an immense project, but guess that that's unique. And so if we could, something like that, I would consider. I don't know how you do the cost estimate to put a reasonable number on it. That throw it out, but conceptually, something like that would be, I would be into. And quickly, just to respond to what Renee had said, we are working with Rhonda and actually another company on applying for DEC ZEV grant funding, which will put hopefully 3 fast chargers downtown. The the grant application at this point will be for this parking lot, the laundromat parking lot, the farmer's market. The downside here is that they will be 50 kW chargers, so they're not, you know, the like 350 kW range that like the newer cars are coming out with that have much bigger capacity. So we're going to be like the very bottom of fast chargers. But it's sort of a grant that came up and it seems like too good an opportunity to not jump on. So we're going to pursue this. And then my hope is that something like this could also include, I in particular have sort of a fascination with like distributed energy coupled with fast chargers. So I would like to see something like that. I know that there are fast charge units that have incorporated batteries. I believe FreeWire is the name of the company that I know of that makes them. So 1 or 2 of those are also, I think, attractive for something like downtown revitalization, specifically because they're much more mobile. So we wouldn't have to put them in New York State right away on Main Street. We also wouldn't have to necessarily put them on village property. They're much smaller footprints. So something like that, I would really like to see. I believe it's FreeWire. And I've talked with Rhonda about this too, and I'm forgetting the name. So I don't know if you remember. But that to me is sort of the approach. So I'm hoping that as far as EV charger goes, we'll be able to sort of do the ZEV funding initially and then kind of backfill more, higher KW options, something like this. And if not this, then the next opportunity.
Any other thoughts or questions from anyone?
I don't like the idea of having it all sidewalk focused. I think the intent is to kind of split it up, but I will point out that we do have a walkability study, and while that section up to Seneca Road is definitely a key piece, there's an argument to kind of extend that through Union to Cuba and all the way through the other side. So if we ever wanted to broaden that in any way, if that was helpful for the grant, that could be an opportunity there. But I'm more interested in having this kind of blend of a couple of different things.
I like your historic preservation idea.
Yeah,
Those bricks are gonna fall eventually.
I know. Well, and all
And a lot of the, like you
is it
said.
lead, cast iron.
Yeah, and that's
Those
gonna cost
details
a
are
lot
just-
of, mhm.
And I believe downtown revitalization is probably less about sidewalk. I don't know, from strategy, I don't know. how that-
It's part of it. A lot of DRIs that have those kinds of sidewalk and street sweeping components. Chief's doing it, at it right now, so, no, it's a weird word, right?
That's not, you make that up, I'm sure.
I actually did not make that up.
No.
I made the same face the first time. somebody said
Road
it.
diet, what is that?
When you have like a really
It's just
wide
making a
road.
road
Oh,
Yeah.
making the
so
road.
that there's more space for sidewalks and bike lanes and used by people instead of cars.
I say we go 100% golf cart, electric golf carts, and we just
There you
put
go.
golf carts all over the place.
So I definitely think
Electric golf cart.
building a strategy around this project that you're clearly have a need for is a smart move. Because you can say, like, look, this is where we definitely need this for our walkability and meeting the needs of our community. Now, what around that can we also. And so that's one way to think about, okay, where are those private projects or those other types of developments we can do. Building a strategy around.
Yeah, Rick, I see your hands up.
I was struggling to find where the hand button was, but let me put a plug in for an idea of taking about a third of the parking lot that's near the laundromat, this mini village, and creating green space in that. I think if you do the math on the number of parking spaces there and change that so that parking is kind of back to back all the way down as you drive in. What it leaves is an amount of space that could be turned into green space and picnicking and whatever space. There's no, that parking lot is pretty inefficient in its ability to park cars because you need a lot of turning space. It's like having a lot of hallways in your home. So I think it would be a great place for green pocket park in there that would allow people to sit at benches and enjoy their lunch. I think there's precious little space in front of the downtown Gimme Coffee and Main Street Market, that this would increase that space, the amount of space that people could use for eating lunches or just socializing immensely. I did do the math. I think it does work. I don't know exactly where village boundaries are on that parking lot, but still in all, I think there's a real opportunity there to create a spot that will just not deplete the parking that we have much. You may lose one or two spaces, and it also allows for a good place for a DC fast charger in amongst that row of parking. So might be a good project. It's probably a fairly inexpensive project, except for tearing up all the blacktop and redoing the plantings and trees and whatever else to make a nice spot in there. So I think it's a valuable idea.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Jerry, any thoughts?
Be happy, go grab it.
I think it is, but yeah.
Okay, just, I really wasn't prepared for this discussion. The first thing that came to mind for me was sidewalks throughout the village. And I know that might not be a downtown corridor issue, but they're horrendous, basically. When you start talking slate, wait till it rains, because you're gonna go down. So I was careful the other day, walking rather in the mud than on the slate sidewalk, because it's real slippery. So, but I haven't really given much thought to this workshop part of it. So,
I did email Connor the other day with a couple of other sections of the village. Folks have emailed about their sidewalks and I mean, they do connect directly to Main Street. I mean, the Union, Hugo Street piece is significant because there's a lot of foot traffic there as well. So maybe that's worth taking a look, having a meeting and taking a look at the map and seeing which sidewalk arteries connect directly to Main Street in that area. At least there'd be some a sidewalk on a side street at the other end of the village, probably harder to justify, but if it connects directly to Main Street in that section, maybe it's worth including.
I had a, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Just a couple of things come to mind for me is one, if there's any way to create gathering space kind of adjacent to or above kind of the creek. I think that's could be a nice thing to have, because it just seems like we have a really nice creek that runs through our village and there's really no good space to really take advantage of it. Sorry, my son is forcing a banana in my face. Apparently he can't open it on his own. So I'm going to do that real quick. And then the other thing is, I don't know if, this has to be purely infrastructure, but thinking about what would support the business district I wonder if there's a lot of kind of bang for the buck to consider money towards kind of advertising or promotion, maybe making a well-produced kind of commercial about Trumansburg and tourism and how you should stop here and stay here and eat here and drink here and get that more around central New York or down in New York City where people come from. You might get a lot, in terms of actually getting people to take advantage of the village and what it has to offer. There might be a lot more ROI there than, some infrastructure that would be nice. But if the goal is to really support local businesses, those aesthetics, and here comes another banana, those aesthetics might not be as, have as much of a direct return. Not that they're not necessary. We don't want brick falling off and buildings coming down, but there might be a fraction of that money that could go really far by, having a really vibrant kind of media production done on the village and all of the uniqueness.
Do you think that would be in the purview of the grant?
Park school grad, by the way, that's what he's.
Yeah, well, and I have to say that as a former business owner, a lot of my frustration was, how do we get those tourists that are down at the basin of the village up into the village? And that was always a real struggle for me. There always seemed to be that, when I worked in Ithaca, it was always like you went to one side of that bridge at Trip Hammer or the other side, and trying to get people to cross that bridge to go one place or another. They're just, we're creatures of habit. But that was always a frustration of mine as a business owner, is how do we pull that business that they get, hundreds of thousands of visitors a year? Wouldn't it be nice to have even a small percentage of that, or a more percentage of that? I know we do get a small percentage of it, but how do we entice those people up into the community, get them to spend money as well? And I just know that from experience that was a frustration of mine as a business owner, is how do you get that draw into town? So then
Yeah, I was scrolling Instagram the other night, and a nice ad of featuring a drone flyover for Gothic Eves popped up. I'm like, oh, that's actually a really nice little social media video,
Yannick Inn did an amazing production video when they opened up their wedding.
Yes, I remember seeing that too.
But it was very impressive.
But I mean, if you rope in, all the breweries and the distilleries and the wineries and kind of connect our business district to all of that activity, I think there's a really nice marketing campaign that could be done to bolster the tourism, and not even that, but just, people here on Parents Weekend for their kids at the colleges to know that, 10 miles up the road, there's a lot going on as well. So that just came to mind is, I know how expensive infrastructure could be, and maybe a fraction of that put aside for marketing and advertising could do a lot of good.
Have we talked to the chamber? I know it's kind of like getting late, but if the part of this is to have private, like parts of the whole package, certainly having them involved, if they've got any ideas, would be good.
I think the chamber was on the list of potentially interested local organizations.
Yeah, we should have a lot of support in that conversation about.
Yeah, I mean, if we're looking for having private, public combination of things, they might have ideas, or their members might.
Does the New York Forward, specifically, does the New York Forward grant materials lend itself to that kind of marketing or economic development push, or is it primarily looking for the infrastructure?
In practice, this type of funding is obviously the first year for, but in practice, this type of it's the as we work with this. infrastructure and capital expenditures. I think it might be an eligible expense, we just not actually ever seen that be successful.
Yeah, and
So,
and
but
I-
there's other funding sources for that type of work, so we could look at it if we can work that in as a component of this, and it doesn't feel like it fits, or feels like it's not going to be competitive, we can certainly every year mark. This is exactly the kind of thing.
That was market New York.
and I was thinking even beyond just kind of the marketing angle, just all the businesses up and down Main Street might have ideas of projects that they're thinking about, and this could be an opportunity to suss those out maybe.
Get some of those done before you-
Sure, right, yeah, and maybe, there might be funding from this to work on some of those potentially.
Actually, this brings me back to our sidewalk conversations about Main Street. All of those bricks that have sagged 3 inches. It's too big a project for Dusty to take on. That maintenance, if we actually price that out, would be very, very high. So that might be something that goes on. I mean, it certainly falls. It's not new per se, but it is a durable improvement. So I would put that on the list.
So, and something I can add from the events and tourism committee, Keith and Tara, that we talked about, right, is the Black Diamond Trail. So if we talk about connecting where all these people are visiting and touring up into the village, and I'm sure you have priorities with sidewalks, but walkability from Saginaw Park via the Black Diamond Trail, and all the people that have come already, but don't have clear wayfaring or sidewalks, plus the conservatory is on that segment that we talked about from Main Street up, so that's a historical marker and tourism to relate to that.
Black Diamond Trail work would have to be state parks would have to apply for.
They would.
Yeah.
Okay.
Black Diamond is all state park.
If that's also. Well, I haven't heard anything about it.
Well, and it's in Ulysses, but
And it's in Ulysses. Okay.
But certainly, I mean, state parks has every nickel they need to do anything they want with the Black Diamond Trail.
Keith, do you hear that?
So it's not up to us to complete the Black Diamond Trail. It's
Okay.
State parks has to
They can do that. Okay.
decide to write the check. Renee, your hand is up.
Yeah, sorry. Just as Keith was talking, the thoughts of encouraging business and where that could go, and trying to find places even. I don't know if Keith, what one of the things you might have been leaning toward was some kind of a business incubator deal site within the village where businesses might look to do training, or even little businesses starting, micro enterprises starting in a facility that the village sponsored, and created a dynamic that drew people here to begin their businesses or to help their businesses flourish.
Are there historic places that signage, that's one thing that they kind of over language, is like they find that signage for historic and cultural sites is. Unlabeled.
Could be a
Yes, that's-
Sandy question.
I don't think so. So our village historian has moved on to, she's actually been able to get signage through which foundation? is it? Pomeroy Foundation. And she's moved on to, and it's great that she has got some of the more obscure, older buildings in the village, which again is fantastic, but kind of the obvious, the conservatory, camp house, and some of the obvious larger, better known Masonic temple. They all have signage.
Did they do the Dorsey Hill house too?
Yeah.
Anything else? Any other comments, questions, input, particularly from members of the public? Do we as a board have a preference over these 3 potential vision statements? I know which one I like. I'm not gonna prejudice the jury just yet.
That strange glare. No, it's fine. You're fine. I moved.
find myself drawn to the last one in its succinctness, but then I also wonder if that's like too just standard. So I kind of go between that and the second.
Go for the second because it sort of calls out a number of the things that we just talked about pretty specifically.
Yeah,
Keith?
because it does cover 3 as well. I liked 3 as well, but it does cover,
Yeah,
the second one covers that as well.
yeah.
Yeah, I would vote for two.
Nancy waiting to join.
Yeah, 2 is my favorite as well. 3 is very sidewalk specific. I mean, it's
Yeah.
basically
Sure.
on the sidewalk. By the
That's a good
sidewalk.
point. Yeah, we kind of expanded beyond just that.
Okay. Well, great. I appreciate everyone's input. Renee and Rick and Jerry, thank you for some great ideas. And Tracy, hopefully that'll give us something to chew on and include in the next 8 days, 9 days.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Moving on then to item number 4 on our agenda is our consent agenda. Everyone should have hopefully had a chance to look at
Mhm.
our abstracts as well as meeting minutes from the last 2 meetings. I will just go through the abstract for the sanctity of the record. We have a general fund abstract totaling $258,365.29. An EMS billing abstract totaling $15,503.06. Water fund abstract totaling $51,517.42. Sewer fund abstract totaling $113,445.72. Big bond repayment in there. And the trust and agency abstract totaling $33,406.36. And so I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
A second,
Oh.
Ben Carver with a motion, Marshall with a
motion,
second.
sorry, second.
Any
Jumping right to the
So
second.
there's, in the minutes, there was a meeting that I wasn't here for that I just came for one vote. So I abstained and said yes. And I marked it saying yes for the whole. meeting.
Oh, goodness.
yeah.
That was 25th. Yes.
second?
Wait a second.
22nd.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was the one where you was,
For the water, we have grant stuff.
yeah.
Any other comments or questions on that piece? Hearing none, then all in favor of approving the consent agenda as amended, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, item number 5 is our first public comment period, privilege of the floor. We have one person from the public online and one in person. So now is the time, if there's anything that either of you would like to address to the board, please, please do. Sure.
I think I'll just remain seated. I wasn't able to attend the CPCR meeting to discuss things. I couldn't be there, so I really wanted to just spend some time giving some of my thoughts regarding zoning. So hopefully you'll indulge me. I'm not going to stick to 3 minutes. It's probably closer to 10, but if you don't mind, I would like to just go ahead and roll with
I will just ask you, we don't have a 3-minute time limit for individual comments, but we do have only 15 minutes allocated to the public comment.
Okay,
So if you would leave a few minutes, as many minutes as you're able to leave open for anyone else, then we'll appreciate it.
hi, I'm Jerry Kraus at 108 East Seneca Road. I've been in T-Burg with my wife since '98. We raised our family here, and we love Trumansburg just like all of us do, for all of the same reasons. I'd like a chance to speak on zoning since I couldn't be at the CPZR committee public session. Trumansburg is a microcosm of American life, and we're in a state of flux, not unlike any other community. We faced a pandemic, civil unrest, deep political divide as we try to learn and grow from our collective experience. The community is engaged in multiple efforts, change efforts, to make Trumansburg better, from our schools and businesses to public safety and the faith community. All of us together are planning for the future and working to enact the new comprehensive plan and vision for the next 20 years and beyond. As we revise the zoning ordinance, excuse me, even though it's late in the game, it's critical that everyone feels heard and understood in this process. I hope that you will listen to people, even if their views may be contrary to the newly adopted goals in the comprehensive plan that we have already bought into. This isn't the clean, linear process that we might wish it to be on a timeline from point A to the future. It's messy. I do want to thank the CPZR committee, the planning board, and the BCA, and anyone else who's worked on this huge project. Of course, thank you to the entire village staff, police, DPW for all their hard work daily, and special thanks to our great fire and EMS team. I've been transported by them 3 times, and I'm eternally grateful. With that said, I've been dealing with zoning issues with this administration for 4 long years. With the proposed zoning ordinance changes, everything's coming to a head, and I respectfully ask that you finally hear me out. I'd like to start by saying what I am not against, and that is growth, progress, and change. What I'm for is thoughtful development, community building, fair, consistent, and accurate interpretation of the zoning rules, and open, transparent, and disciplined management of the permitting and zoning processes. I'm also for affordable housing, and I'll put that in quotes, for young families and seniors to age in place. I guess the big question is how we do it. How do we increase population in the village? By how much? By when? How do we maintain both the character of the village and fulfill the goal of ADUs and infill development? How dense is dense enough? I'm not going to go into detail on the proposed ordinance changes here. I'll try to email my comments and questions on that, but rather I'd want to focus on zoning enforcement. There are permits that should not have been issued due to zoning issues, and variances have been granted in about 80% of the cases, which defeats the purpose of the rule book. I fundamentally disagree with our zoning by exception philosophy. I'm glad to share examples with the planning board or anyone else if they wish on some of these cases. How can we expect to manage and administer the new zoning rules when we can't follow the old ones? Keep in mind, and believe me when I say that I have no malice toward any homeowner or neighbor who wants to improve their property. But when small developers and village decisions impact my quiet and tranquil life in my backyard, I get upset. You have to know I'm a rule follower. And I don't like it when people drive down the shoulder of the road in heavy traffic, taking advantage of everyone else. This evening, I want to focus for a minute on my yet unresolved case on a project that you approved, Warden, right behind my house. I promise to keep this brief. Remember, this has gone on for 4 years, and I'm keeping this to 10 minutes. Do you remember a few years ago when I was rambling in a trustee board meeting about zoning and my complaint about this building? This is the building. Besides being really nervous and not prepared to speak at that meeting, I was in atrial fibrillation. And as I stammered and searched for words, you asked me, "Do you have a question, Jerry?" Well, a few years, a dozen cardioversions, a pacemaker, and heart surgery, I do still have some questions. In the summer of 2018, my neighbor's property went up for sale, and I was concerned about this abandoned structure. It's been abandoned since 1965, from what I understand. It's 5 feet from my backyard. The village recommended that I file a complaint of violation, so I did in September of 2018. My complaint referenced the zoning ordinance, sections 204 and 206, about pre-existing non-compliant structures not being altered without a special use permit. And section 302 on dimensional setbacks. Yes, I also mentioned raccoons and woodchucks and turkey vultures, but I never referenced any New York State building or fire code in my complaint. So in spite of my zoning complaint, you authorized the permit to fix the building code violations 1 week before Christmas on December 18th, 2018. Where to start? I had been told that the village sent the owner a letter requesting that certain actions be taken to shore up the structure and deal with the violations. When I asked what violations were cited and what remediation was requested, you told me that you were becoming increasingly uncomfortable and that I was asking too many questions. I'm still not sure what the village demanded and what the owner was bound to do, but I would guess it was not this. This is where we are today. Let me update you on the project you authorized. This is the progress to date. After $18,000 investment and a new foundation by the best barn repair guy in 3 counties, the turkey vultures are alive and well. And the building is more porous than it ever was. There is no way this building is becoming a dwelling. Please have them pull the plug on that idea and declare what their planned use will be for that structure. The permit has not been renewed for a 4th year. The permit was renewed 3 years in a row and there was no progress. But I want assurances that this project will be handled under the 2012 zoning ordinance rules and not the new ADU rules. I wish I didn't have to think about any of this and that I had confidence that the right calls are being made, but I'm not. As we speak, there are 2 more pre-existing non-compliant structures that received permits. I'm glad to share those details with anyone. And again, I have nothing against the owners. I don't even know them. It's the enforcement that I take issue with. Do you remember when I was denied a hearing with the BZA on my case because you told me that the BZA is for complainants who were denied something, not like mine, even though it was on an official village zoning complaint form. And if I didn't like the decision about the permit issue, I would have to file an Article 78 proceeding in court. Well, if you look at the zoning ordinance, the old version or the new version, you will see section 805, complaints of violations. Whenever a violation of this ordinance occurs, any person may file a complaint in regard thereto. All such complaints must be made in writing and shall be filed with the zoning officer, who shall properly record such complaint and immediately investigate and report thereon to the Board of Trustees and refer such cases to the Board of Appeals where necessary. In addition, in the proposed new ordinance, we added section 210 under the pre-existing non-compliant Article 2, Board of Appeals determination. The Board of Appeals shall have jurisdiction to hear and determine any claims as to whether a particular use is a valid non-conforming use, or whether a non-conforming use has been improperly extended or enlarged, or any other matter relating to non-conformance issues. Such jurisdiction may be exercised by an appeal from the decision of the code enforcement officer as herein provided, or by direct application to the board in those instances where there was no application. I attempted to deliver my packet to the BZA. I couldn't get on that agenda. I was denied getting on an agenda anytime in the future, so I dropped off my packet to the chair of the BZA. That was in what, 2019 or so. So my questions are these. What are you going to do to bring some discipline, fairness, and consistency to the permitting and zoning review process? Will we slow down on the drastic changes to the zoning ordinance when we have no idea if ADUs are going to solve our housing problem, or if infill development might create a whole new set of problems? Will our BZA philosophy change under the new rules to make a variance a rare occurrence? What can we do to guard against groupthink, which I think may have led us to this point, and listen to people who may have different views on zoning? I disagree that we should wait on short-term rental discussion until after we nail down the ADU rules in the zoning ordinance. What is to prevent someone from buying a property and building ADUs to rent as short-term rentals? You cannot separate these two issues. The concept that zoning doesn't matter because infill development will become self-regulating is a ludicrous theory. Or I've heard on the CPZR that the BZA will handle it on the back end. Can we please get a grip on reality? None of this is going to find some acceptable waterline by itself. There are people who want to make a buck at anyone else's expense. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jerry. Nancy, I see you online. Did you have something you want to add to public comment before we close it? Nancy's monitor. There's Nancy. No, okay. Nancy's saying no. All right. Then I will move on to item number 6 on the agenda, which is reports from representatives. We have representative from Town of Ulysses and Tompkins County. Ann, why don't you kick us off?
Okay, thanks. Let's see, I first just want to say I know it's a big task to go over any land use issues. So often happy at the county, even though we have to deal with a lot of things, we don't have to deal with that. And I know it takes a lot of work and listening to people. So I appreciate you doing it in a thoughtful way. The sales tax, we'll start with that. In June, it was, the county sales tax was down 14.2%. We're not sure exactly why. We certainly hope it's not a trend, but typically in June, it goes up. So it was down 14.12% from last June. And so that meant the municipalities actually was even lower than that, was 29.77% lower than last June. But overall, for year to date, the county and the municipalities overall are still up. The county is still up 9.95% from last year, and the municipalities, again, that's an average 3.75% up. So we'll stay tuned and keep an eye on that. we are very thick in the budget process right now and at the county. So one of the big things I just wanted to say is what we're looking at as far as the tax levy increase is trying to keep it at, our target is only to raise it 1.46% of the whole levy, which would mean approximately about $80 to $85 increase on a median income, medium priced house that is priced about 225,000. As far as the exact tax rate, that kind of goes up and down. As folks know, the price of real estate has been going up, and so has the value. And we're speaking of that, we're contemplating through our assessment of changing from 100% assessment rate to 80% assessment rate. And I do know a thing or two about real estate, and as I grow up with in a family of real estate, it was a real estate company, and being a home inspector, following the market, I cannot tell you, and it's been explained to me twice, what the advantage is of going from 100% assessment to 80% assessment. But it's been explained to us that will give the assessment department time to catch up and also to not respond too quickly to the fluctuations in the prices. So to kind of let things settle down a bit. And also just from a staffing point of view to try and keep up with the changing assessments. So that's something we're considering right now. Getting back to the budget, we are having our budget forum on September 27th. And if anybody wants to submit any information to us on, we have many over target requests that people can weigh in on. That's typically what people talk to us about. And so you can come to that forum. There's also going to be a final public hearing on November 7th. I believe both of them are going to be at 7 p.m. But of course, you can send us information for that. And I thought there was one more thing. I'm trying to keep things in my head, which isn't always the best thing. Why don't we let, if I could punt to Mary, if you guys can punt to her, and I'll see if I can find the one more thing I was going to say.
Sure.
All right, thanks a lot.
Okay,
Welcome, Mary.
hi. So the town has received information on a couple of development projects that people are looking to do in the town. The Inn at Teganic did a presentation for us, and they're looking to expand their operation quite a bit. And so they came to the town because the things that they want to do are not allowed by the zoning in the town currently. So they are interested in forming a development district. So they had plans and an architect there who presented this information. Basically, if I understand the notes correctly, they have 24 rooms there, and they want to build in a bunch of different buildings, structures on the property that were actually not really meant to be hotels. They were houses. They've been converted to rooms, and so they want to tear down those buildings that were houses and put up one big structure, 3 floors, 105 rooms, which would be a big increase from what they have right now. So we listened to the presentation. We told them that we weren't likely to take any action on any proposal that comes before the board without input from our planner, and he has actually not started yet. he is, I think, the last time I heard it was around the end of September, but it seems like it extends a little bit each time we hear. So he's not on board yet. And this was actually just the presentation. It wasn't it wasn't a formal request. So so we'll see what happens with that. One thing that came up that you might find interesting is that apparently the Inn at Teganic now gets water from the village. So any big increase in development there would probably require additional water resources, and it may end up being something where the town has to create a water district for the inn if it's approved, which is not it's not certain at this point. And then we also received a request from someone who bought the property on 89 that used to be a gas station. I think it's near Garrett Road. It's just south of the park on 89. And it's a building that's been empty for quite a few years. And so they came to us. It's a couple that runs the Angel Heart Diner in Ithaca. Anyway, they bought the building and they were looking for a grant from New York State under this Restore New York funding grants for derelict properties. But we couldn't really create a letter of intent without having their plans reviewed by the BZA and the planning board, because they're going to make some structural changes. So we told them to come back. We are very supportive of repurposing this building since it has been derelict for so long. But just the stars didn't align quite right for us for that. And then the other thing, apart from budget season, which we're working into, and the usual, paying bills that we're doing, we did create a water source protection plan advisory committee, which is a group of residents who will be looking at water needs for the town, including wells and any possible expansion of water districts that now exist. And it's strictly advisory committee, and we're hoping that it will be a useful committee to us as we move into working on our comprehensive plan, which we hope to do when our planner, we start to do when our planner gets here at the end of the month. So that's my report. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
Questions from you?
Could you say the name of the committee again, Mary? The advisory committee?
I didn't quite hear you.
Sorry, could you say the name of the advisory committee again?
Oh, it's the Water Source Protection Plan Advisory Committee.
Thank you.
Any other questions from Mary? Thank you, Mary. And did you find that other thing you were looking for?
Yeah, yes, I see it written here that I just assumed it would be in my head. So I just wanted to reiterate again that yes, we have the application period is open for the county's $6.53 million community recovery grant. And so thanks for talking with me today earlier, Warden. And I just sent you the link about the Human Services Coalition forum, informational forum that they are hosting through our consulting group, MRB. That's on Wednesday, 9 a.m. And anybody in the community that's interested to see if your organization can participate in that can apply. You can look online at the county website. You can go to the Human Services Coalition and go to their website and sign up for this forum. You need to sign up ahead of time, and it's at 9 a.m. They're going to have a lot of Q&A. So that was the other little thing that I wanted to mention.
Any questions for Ann?
Oh, and lastly, I'm doing a little PR, as you're suggesting, for the community. So trying to get people as they go visit Tegenic Falls to come and visit parts of the county. So trying to do my part in the background here.
Do you need signage for the background, like Trumansburg this way? Oh, you're muted, in.
If anybody can help me do that, I'm not that, I was thinking about putting a little sign there saying, come visit the village, I was thinking you get a little coupon book that you pick up at the visitor station there, and, you go to visit 2 places and then you get a free drink at Garrett's or something, but
I love it.
I'd be willing to test drive that too.
Waterfall bingo.
Okay, if there are no questions for Ann, we'll move on to our reports. A handful in here. Speed limit law update is just very brief to bring the board and anyone watching up to speed, no pun intended. The governor did sign a law a few months ago, which would allow for village-wide speed limits to be reduced to 25 miles an hour. However, upon more careful reading, it specifically exempts state roads, which are maintained by state DOT. So here we are, right back at square one. I have had a conversation with Assemblymember Kellis, who felt that that was not meant to be the intent of the bill as drafted. So she's going to see how she may be able to be helpful, specifically in villages with a vibrant downtown core and a state road running right through it with lots of pedestrians. So stay tuned on that one. In the Dropbox, you have 72. Every year since 2014, we have needed to reapprove our Trumansburg Deer Management Program, which I would like to do for another season. The application paperwork has already been sent into DEC. They are, however, just waiting on this document. This is what is known as the Deer Management Program Plan. And it basically outlines the reasons why we're requesting permitting for Deer Management Plan. It updates the numbers. So September of 2014 through March of 2022 is kind of our history. Removed approximately 360 deer from within the village during that time frame. Gives an idea of how activities will occur, what the rules are. Basically, nothing's changed since last year. No, since 2014.
Oh. So,
Biggest year I think was 90 and change, and the lowest is 40 and change. So.
sure, for a second, but it's going to escalate the whole thing.
And so certainly if there's questions, we can discuss it, but I would entertain a motion to adopt the 2022-2023 Trumansburg Deer Management Plan as presented.
Second.
Are there any questions, comments?
Well, actually, is participant enthusiasm waning yet?
So still, it's been generally the same number. We've had a couple of new participants over the last few years, but generally the same folks, and just a solid core group, and they're back every year. They're ready to go for another year. There are no questions, then all in favor of approving the 2022-2023 Trumansburg Deer Management Plan, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. In the Dropbox, you will see the actual proposal from MRB for the New York Forward Grant application. They have, thank them very much, begun this work already, hence the vision statement we saw, Tracy and Rhonda's work to date, all of the work that's gone to this point. But we do need to formally approve the expenditure, total compensation not to exceed $6,500. That includes all of the work up to date, plus the grant writing itself and the submission of the grant. We did receive our second round of ARPA funds a couple of months ago, so there's additional kind of cash in the general fund, and then come audit and budget modification season, we'll have to allocate it to a specific line. Hopefully everyone's gotten a chance to review the proposal, and certainly if there are any questions, we can put Tracy in the hot seat. Otherwise, I would entertain a motion to approve spending up to $6,500 on the development of the New York Forward application by MRB on behalf of the village.
A second.
Questions or comments? That's what happens when you get things in between meetings and the deadline is now 2 days away. Closer than it was 15 minutes ago. There are no questions or comments, then all in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
So that's to accept the proposal and the expenditure. The next item is actually a resolution which needs to be included with the grant, which I will just read into the record. Village of Trumansburg, New York Forward Grant Program 2022. This is a resolution of support and authorization. So whereas the Village of Trumansburg Village Board supports submission of a New York Forward Grant application on behalf of the village for downtown revitalization investments. And whereas Empire State Development is administering the New York Forward Grant Program intended to revitalize and reinvigorate downtowns and small rural communities through investment in transformative public and private anchor projects that improve the quality of life for residents and promote business and visitation in downtown. And whereas the Village of Trumansburg Comprehensive Plan adopted in 2021 includes multiple goals aimed at improving quality of life, historic preservation, recreation, and downtown revitalization. And whereas awarded funding would induce a number of public and private anchor projects that collectively will attract residents, improve public amenities, and maximize the visitor experience in downtown Trumansburg. Now therefore be it resolved that the village board identifies the village mayor as the authorized representative of the village to submit the New York Forward application on behalf of the village and execute all associated documents relative to and as required for the New York Forward application, including the funding agreement and financial application as applicable. And be it further resolved that the Village of Trumansburg Board fully supports the proposed revitalization efforts and submission of the New York Forward grant application by MRB Group on behalf of the village to induce transformative downtown projects. Entertain a motion to adopt this resolution.
So moved.
Second. Any questions, comments, or edits? Hearing none, then all in favor, please say aye.
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 That's it for me. I do have a need for an executive session at the end for a couple of items. But for now, we'll turn it over to Marcia, Fire and TACC.
Not a lot going on. The trucks are going in for annual service and they're working on the numbers for the annual gear purchase, which they estimate between $10,000 and $12,000. I was unable to make the Wednesday meeting. I will be unable to make the following Wednesday meeting, but I do keep up to date with Matt, and he said right now we're in good shape.
Okay. Questions from Marcia? All right, EMS, youth, street tree.
So, street trees, sort of the same thing. We are moving forward with our inventory. Youth commission, we just did, we sort of resumed, I mentioned before that we do like the summer break, so we just finished our break, as did everyone else in school. Jump right in with budget. We are looking at a fairly steep increase to the budget for the youth commission. We have the ROS, Rural Youth Services, which basically oversees our program manager. Are you familiar with any of how this works?
It wasn't that complicated when I did it years ago. It was really simple.
So it's this, were you the program manager?
I wasn't the program manager. I was just the board rep.
Oh, okay, all right. So basically the way it works is the youth commission through the village, or I'm sorry, through the town who acts as the fiduciary agent, contracts with cooperative extension, who then hires program managers sort of on our behalf. They run a variety of programs through the school. We're sort of loosely out of the school, in conjunction with the school. Like the programs are generally targeted, for the type of kid who might not play sports or do theater. The student for which there are no other programs,
Right.
Like this is sort of, really trying to support everyone. Anyway, this is our effort at that, and so our CCE rather had a new executive director. When they came in, they increased wages by 3%, sort of across the board. They're like, why has this been done? We need to do this. And so we now have to catch up for a raise that we didn't or that we didn't pass. And then if we want to get another 3% raise, this is sort of our secret. So we're catching up with that. In addition to that, the county recreation line. Well, basically our agreement with the youth bureau. Anyway, we have a contract that again is through the town. They've actually already approved it. So yeah, sorry. Things that we were not consulted about, we now have to pay for. In theory, so this will be the way this budget works is it gets translated into a budget, a request for us from our budget that we allocate. So come our budget season, this will be a number that gets plugged in, and I will reiterate this, the last few sentences. We'll talk, but that's kind of where we are now. It's a little bit sort of is what it is.
Now, when I was president of community council, we got funds from United Way that we,
Yeah.
is it still the same
Yeah.
that way? Okay,
Those funds, I mean, so United Way now directly allocates their funding. to
okay.
youth
So there's no
commission, but it's-
intermediary that does that.
But I
Okay,
mean, that, like, the council's still there, and they've like taken, because we can't solicit the grants. So
Right.
like, sometimes there'll be the pass through for that money, so the relationship still exists, but United Way just directly, and United Way actually funds the recreation program and
right,
the program manager separately, so there's.
right, because I used to get checks for both. Yep.
Recreation partnership was the word I was looking for. Anyway, so that's where that stands. Also got to hear some reports about how summer rec went, which turns out was very amazing. I feel every time I get reports about how Will's doing it, I feel it's very good about it, and pretty impressed and happy that sort of that transition happened pre-COVID, and he's been impressively resilient and agile, as has Ethan, who's our program. That said, that's youth and trees, EMS. I'll just run through the calls. So over 15, Hector 3, Mecklenburg 7, Trumansburg 9, Ulysses 26, which is very high. We also had a fairly large number of, or actually a very high number of mutual aid calls, range from the city of Ithaca to Interlaken, Montour Falls, Ovid, Watkins Glen. So, just all kinds of exciting things happening. What's that? I don't have
That's
an
okay.
added number.
Okay.
But I'd be happy to share. Like, that's. Okay,
I'm sorry, did you need to ask about office supplies? Is that no?
oh, thank you. Yes, did that make, is that on the agenda or I can just include it now? You can just include it now. So I don't know, have you and Matt talked about the office reorganization? Marshall?
No.
So Joel has provided a general plan. The way the offices work at the fire station is basically everyone just was like, I don't know, go over there, right? It's like sort of the like design aesthetic of the whole building. So right now there's two offices. One is for Matt and Joel. They share an office. Joel obviously is there most days. Matt is there more frequently, but obviously less frequently. And then there's another sort of exterior office that is for the paramedic and EMT on staff, as well as the line officers. So generally, the line officers have one computer station. There's two others for the Joel would like to gut that room, the shared office, and put in something that resembles an actual office. So I think the sort of look of the furniture is really haphazard, and it's not like a usable workspace. It's sort of, it's like half. I mean, unless you've sat in there and tried to work, it's hard to explain, but it's a very difficult space to occupy when you're actually trying to do something. It's not bad if you're just sitting and talking, but so he has come up with a plan to do basically all of this work himself. To buy the supplies would cost up to $5,000. I believe he's talked with Matt about this, so it's not. I had asked him to talk about Matt.
Must be it's in the
funding
early
it.
stages because he hasn't approached me regarding money or what we think we could do.
So now the question is, if we divide it, then we can approve it separately as commissioners. But if he wants to spend it all, then I think it should be a bulk. So I think what I would like to do is approve that Joel, I guess, authorize Joel to spend up to $5,000 on an office renovation.
It's on the structural, just furniture.
No, just inside.
So are they gonna
Sorry,
turn
not
this
cutting
into,
walls,
instead of
just
one,
furniture.
they're gonna make it a more functional one workspace, or they're gonna divide it into two workspaces?
So they're not changing any of the walls. I'm sorry, I got what's not right. No, just removing the furniture and refurnishing it so that it's actually desks with
More,
comparable computers
okay,
and, basically so that it will be a workspace instead of a sloppy hangout / workspace.
right.
It's the idea.
So an office reconfiguration,
Yeah, sure, that sounds.
which could include also,
It will include painting. I mean, he has.
it's not gonna include hardware.
So you don't
It
think
will
the
include
cost should be
hardware, so-
split? You don't think the cost should be split between?
Well, I think
the
that's
two?
what I'm, so the idea is if we approve now that spend out of the EMS budget, then you can go that way. It is primarily for the EMS staff, so. Generally, historically, we do split all of the station stuff,
Right,
but I would, in this case, since it sort of is predominantly EMS, I'd be happy to defer to you and that and see how that goes. Just
okay, I'll
makes-
ask him.
Makes some sense to me, or maybe it's 75-25 or something like that. Which now that I'm saying it out loud, completely defeats the purpose
Purpose.
of authorizing the spend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we'll just move forward with that as our operating principle. We'll just keep it under whatever we can authorize. Let's put it that way. If it doesn't work,
Because it
come
would be
back next month with the more
mutually
specific-
beneficial, even though EMS would use it, it's. for
Sure, well, it's a
EMS.
shared workspace. for
Right,
sure. Yeah.
right.
Why don't we'll move forward like that, and if it doesn't work, then I'll just bring it up again next.
Okay,
We
So
have
no
it every
pre-sale.
other week now, so we're plenty of opportunities.
I'll bring it up tomorrow at our next meeting.
Yeah.
You got any other-
Nope, that's all. Thank you for your.
DPW Water Sewer CBZR Farmers Market, other than those
I get
three
rid of
items
some
listed.
words. All right, so quick updates before we get into all the MRB stuff. On the CBZR front, we did hold the public information meeting last Wednesday. Fairly well attended. I think most of these seats were taken up. I think we had a count of around 30 or so folks in person, with another dozen or so, 15 maybe on Zoom. A lot of good feedback, a lot of good conversation. The committee is now, on Thursday, we'll be reviewing all of that feedback, as well as feedback from the planning board, from this board, attorney, lots of comments on email, and so forth. Next steps there would be, after working through that feedback, to send an updated proposal to this board for kind of taking forward from there. But at this point, with the amount of feedback that we've had, and some of the other conversations in the board as to how we might want to add additional kind of illustrations or other kind of educational information around what looked like the outcome of the proposal might be, I'm still expecting that to be another month or two of kind of meetings and so forth. So I would expect this to come later in the fall, or maybe even later than that. So we'll see where that all lands.
Did the planning board get you a memorandum on their feedback?
They sent a whole email
Did
of,
you?
yeah, with a document and everything. And I'm actually gonna join their next meeting, because I had at least one kind of question. They had made a comment that I didn't understand, so I wanted to get clarity on that. And we might have a further discussion, since I'm just gonna show up at the meeting. On the DPW water sewer side, the big news of the week, of the month, of the year, is the bridge is reopened to much success and fanfare. That is exciting. We've got photos from Dusty on Friday and from Alan. And so that is open back to the public. People can walk across it. There was some conversation about potentially naming the bridge in honor of somebody, and possibly some sort of like reopening or naming ceremony of some sort. I don't know if you want to talk about that tonight. I know you said this could go long, so.
Let's
happy to
discuss
go
that in
ahead.
2 weeks.
All right.
Okay.
So we'll push that. And so then we are into all of the MRV pieces. Yeah, Rory, maybe you want to leave that. I can kind of pipe in, but I'm a little bit late to that party, as my head's been in zoning recently.
So I met with Bill and Matt and MRB last week. I had tasked them with the first one. So I've had several meetings, as you know, over the last couple of years with residents of the Larchmont Tamarack area. The water issues there certainly don't get any better. Dry summer like this one, there are still water issues on some of the properties. And so I had been talking to Caitlin Olson, town supervisor, about possibly some type of a project that would help in that area. And so what's kind of cooked, and this is a couple, 18 months worth of trying to figure out what can be done. Is there anything that can be done? Almost all of the water issues are on private property. The only way to mitigate, in my mind, not being an engineer, and not having stayed at the Holiday Inn Express last night, the only way to mitigate the water issues in that part of the village, if you look at a map, is to get it to the creek, which is about a quarter of a mile, an eighth of a mile to the south and southeast. I believe there's a way to do that. And it would involve a cooperative effort of the village and the town. It would involve permanent easements through a number of properties, approaching the property owners, explaining what we're doing and why. And a significant amount of drainage work, drain tile and piping, to move water from point A to point B through easements, because otherwise we would be spending taxpayer dollars on private property, which is a huge number. So the first proposal that I would like us to consider tonight is for MRB to do the field investigation and the design work to determine what it would take to do that. Tell us what the project looks like, where's the water going to go, whose easements do we need, how much is it going to cost? Without that, I'm just brainstorming. With that, we will have a knowledge of what can be done to mitigate what is a 30-year problem in the making with respect to drainage in that section of the village. I feel like, and this dovetails in with the next MRV proposal, but I feel like we're picking off sections of the village that have water issues. I think the work that was done on Seneca Road, we'll wait until spring when we get some runoff, should help the Prospect Street area and portions of Seneca Road. We'll find out if that's true. MRV hopes that it will be. There are certainly lots of other areas that need work, which is part of the reason for the next proposal. But this particular pain point for the village is, it's obvious, it's clear. We don't need a comprehensive stormwater plan to tell us that there's a lot of water in Larchmont and Tamarack. And so making a move in the direction that will at least say, and I'll be perfectly honest, when I meet with a resident and I say, we're working on it, that's okay, but that's, you know, I can't keep saying that forever. If MRB comes back and says, here's how you do it, here's where it goes, and it's going to be $13 million, then I get to tell residents of Larchmont and Tamarack, we need to find $13 million from somewhere. It's not going to come from a bond that we're not going to borrow it. It's more definitive, it's more concrete. And so that's my hope is again, you know, we have a little bit of stormwater money in the budget. The rest will have to come out of reallocation of ARPA funds. For $9,500, MRB will do all of the work and create the plan along with cost estimates so that we can say this is how we solve the water problem in Larchmont and Tamarack. That next step then is probably going to have to be, and I have no idea, again, making up numbers. Let's assume that it's in the mid seven figures, 3, 4, 5 million. That will have to be a joint grant application of some type between the village and the town, with a whole lot of work to get easements and whatnot. That's the kind of money we might be able to find from DEC. FEMA occasionally has grant programs, so that'll be primarily MRV's job is to hunt down the grant money. But without knowing what the project looks like, I won't know who to go begging to for money. And that's proposal number one. So, conversation, questions?
I think it's a good idea, because especially if you have to come up with answers for a resident, and if you know, it's the same answer as, why don't we put all of our electrical wires and everything underground so everything looks pretty? Or why don't we fix all of our pipes in the whole village all at one time? I think sometimes those projects, until you have a real concept of the cost of something, that's more a definitive answer than, you know, I think it's a smart move. Trumansburg is a very wet village. No matter, I don't know of one person that I know of that doesn't have a sump pump in their basement. A lot, you know, in Trumansburg. So I think that's something, as we grow in the foreseeable future, that's going to be an issue. And I think that I think it's smart to at least get some answers, like you said.
I will say that just as an aside, you know, for 30 years or so, the default stance of the village has been that these are private property matters caused by private property development, and it's not a village problem. And while that is legally technically correct, I do think we're at a point where, particularly with the amount of grant funding that seems to be getting thrown around by the state and federal government, that there may be an opportunity to solve it, but it has to be done a certain way, because it is not public infrastructure at the moment.
But it could be if the stormwater runoff caused erosion issues and things like that, right?
I mean, the drainage, specifically the drainage issues and problems are on private property. So transferring the problem to kind of public property is the trick.
Right.
Can it be done? I think the answer is yes. Should it be done is a different question. And then how would we manage that? Or how would we do that? Engineers to figure out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point. Right? Like, we always, you build in a swamp, you're gonna live in a swamp, right? And the idea that you could build in a swamp, live in a swamp, and then 10 years later have someone else to drain that swamp under you, so you're high and dry, is, you know, I don't really like looking at that sense of structure. You kind of zoom out, but yeah, grant money, if it falls within the parameters our state sets up to give out money. Right, which this feels like a pretty low threshold to sort of get admitted to that part. So.
I think I'm kind of with Ben. I don't mind spending the money to try and sort it out and get a better sense of what's going on. I think I'll have concerns about actually addressing it, but that in large part depends on what the response comes back as. I know a lot of where we're trying to head is less of drain things quickly to a river, because that just gets a lot of, you know, everything that's on the top of the soil just kind of drains off, and more of where do we put something to sit and drain and seep in more over a longer period of time. So I'd be curious how that's kind of more modern, I think, mentality of water, stormwater management kind of plays into this idea. I'm also kind of looking at like the topographical map for it. It's very flat. It's like just stupid flat right over there. So like just in general, trying to drain it. But I mean, that's again, that's an MRV question, right? That's what they'll sort out. So yeah, I'm fine with kind of putting the money in to see what can be done. I'm cautious about what can or if we should be doing something once we kind of find out more.
Keith, any thoughts?
Muted.
Apologize, I had a child on me, so I wouldn't turn my camera off. No, I agree with what I've heard. I have nothing really to add on this.
Okay, then I would entertain a motion then to approve spending up to $9,500 on the Larchmont Tamarack area drainage evaluation done by MRB. Someone would like to move it. Motion, do we have a second?
Yep, second.
Other questions, comments,
You have to know what fund that would be spent on.
general?
I don't have to say general fund, it's general.
Okay, if there are no other comments or questions, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay. The next piece is much bigger. This is their proposal for a comprehensive stormwater management plan. I'm not going to go into all the details of it, because what I'd like to have us do is the grand total for everything that they would consider a comprehensive stormwater management plan is almost $80,000, $70,085. What I would like to have us do is apply to what Ann just announced, the community recovery from the grant program. Have the village apply to Tompkins County for grant funding for this. I think that the stormwater management is part of the county's comprehensive plan. I think it fits in, crosses a lot of divides, and I don't see us coughing up $80,000 on our own. So some portion of that, if not all of it, if we can get the county to help pay for it, because it also helps to achieve some of the county's goals with respect to that stormwater management. So we don't need any type of resolution or anything, but I'm bringing this forward because I think it's something that we need to conceptually be moving towards. But how to pay for it, I think going with the county grant process is the way to start. If for any reason we don't get that money from the county, then we'll have to perhaps our assembly member will have a budget allocation. That's how we pay for part of the, well, that's how we did pay for the Seneca Road drainage work, was from the last assembly member. So that's my plan on that next proposal. Certainly, if there's any questions on that piece, let me know. But I think getting funding to pay for this piece is the way to go. Now, the third piece is also a big number, similar in dollar amount. And this one I am going to suggest we pay for. This is multiple parts, and Ben jump in. It's something Ben and Dusty have been working with MRB on. It's different. There's multiple pieces to this on the water and sewer side of things. There is something that I've wanted to have done for the last 4 years, which is moving toward GIS mapping of all of our water and sewer infrastructure. When there's a water main break, water bubbling out of the ground, they shouldn't have to go back to the shop and look through 30-year-old records to find out where the closest tap is to turn it off. It should be something that the supervisor can pull up on their smartphone and know exactly where everything is. There is also a piece of this, I don't remember exactly which part. Asset inventory. So what I learned last week, and Ben, maybe you were aware of this, but I wasn't, is that the federal government, in its infinite wisdom, has mandated that by the end of 2024, right around the corner, believe it or not, municipal water systems have an inventory of every home and whether they're piping or what their piping is. Lead, copper, PVC. And so anything built after, I think, 1986, 92, somewhere in that time frame, is automatically known that it's not lead. However, anything prior to that, you don't know unless you go look. And Uncle Sam has mandated that we find out. That's a big deal. That's knocking on doors and that's looking. So all of this, these are in no particular order, but some of these things are now going to be moved out of the A, B, and C order based on this arbitrary deadline of 2 years from this fall.
And then what is my question? So then Uncle Sam goes knocking and finds out you have.
That's outside the scope of my office. I'll have to talk to your
Holy
congressman or
Moses.
senator.
Yeah,
about
really.
that.
Call your congressman.
And so the total proposal from MRB is for all of these different pieces, which are not necessarily always connected, but they're all things that we've either been working on or would like to have done. It's about $73,000. So call it 75 for round number sake. My hope, my goal is that we split it over 3 years, 3 budget years. And so in the spring of 23, whichever part MRB needs to do first in order to meet this deadline at the end of 24, we do in, let's say, April, May of 23. We start the new budget cycle June of 23, and we'll be into another 25,000. So we'll be able to knock out $50,000 worth of work in a calendar year, but it'll be spread out over 2 budget years. And then the last piece, whichever one we pick, will be done in June of 24. So over essentially 18 calendar months, but 3 budget years, we'll be able to knock out all of the things on this list. $25,000 out of any 1 year's budget in water is not a big lift, particularly now that we finally adjusted rates a little bit. Some of it is sewer related, so we'll be able to split the 25 between water and sewer. So I'm not actually worried about the dollars and finding it in each year's budget, as long as we're able to spread it out that way. MRB says that that's not a problem. And so approving it now, we don't have to approve it tonight, but approving it now will allow them to gear up for spring and what they want to hit first.
And this is just for the mapping? It's for all three.
So we would have asset inventory,
Mhm.
GIS mapping of water and sewer system, GIS implementation. That's where you take the data and feed it into an app that's of use to the supervisor directly. Inventory of lead, copper, galvanized.
So their asset inventory is federally mandated, right? We're not getting any money from the feds to do that?
Nope.
Stinkers.
What is the tap card?
That's the shut-offs.
Is that, but isn't that in just the GIS mapping?
No,
What's
so
the distinction?
they are, so I think the idea is that this is not going to have all of the shut-off valves won't be inventoried. They'll have like, what we're gonna have is all those cards are gonna be digitized. They'll be in like close, right? So GIS is like down to the like square foot sort of a thing.
Yeah.
So this will be like, instead of that, there will be these 3x5 cards, whatever they have at the DPW.
Okay.
And it'll be like, this house is shut off valve. And so you'll just go to the house and say, here's the card. And the card says it's 5 feet from the oak tree and 8 feet from the road. And so like, it's a stopgap, right? It's like, we can scan all that in and get it in for all of the houses in the entire village.
The implication being that the map will be wrong.
Right, that the map, will like, it'll be you'll click on the property lot and it won't say like, it's exactly here. And you can like walk over with like your GPS phone and you will point at it. It'll just say like, here's the description. But it means that they don't have to go back and forth to like the shop and pull out cards.
I was just imagining the map being something that you could just walk over.
Yeah.
So and it will for like the big stuff, right? So it will for like water mains. So I think it says that they'll survey and map. This is kind of at the second page. I think it says like hydrants, water main, system valves, hydrant valves, but not the like 2,300 approximate water shut-off valves across the whole village and the entire water system. Because mapping that would be significantly more work than just scanning all these cards and putting it in the.
One, it's also the difference between village.
Right, right. But it's still like, that stuff's really important still for the DPW to know, you know, when during water breaks and stuff, so on.
I think that's a good strategy. Break it up. It's pretty manageable. I mean, I must admit that I saw these numbers. And I was just like, thank you. But
I will say that
deferring
like,
one and-
like this is like bringing us not even into the 21st century, but like the 20th century. Like we literally still have just paper maps from like the 50s. And that's like, and like Dana's infinite wisdom and knowledge is like how we manage our water system right now. And it's really not sustainable. The other thing I hadn't realized initially that like this can do is basically you have this map and the data of it, that's great, but also you have now this inventory of all these assets and you can track information about them. Like, hey, we went and exercised these 5 shut-off valves last month or last year or whatever. Let's go do another 5. These ones we haven't touched in 5 years. You can track all that information. You can track this information, like which houses have what infrastructure. And so
also
you
do like multi-generational replacement. Right? So like
right.
what Bruce knew needed to be replaced this year, we no longer know.
So I see this, I really do see this as an investment in like kickstarting a process that just continues to get added to and improved on and developed. And, you know, in 10 or 20 years, we have a much better, like we can actually manage our system rather than just like keeping it in somebody's head.
Exactly.
For that, so move the whole thing and then.
Right, I think we can move the approval of the proposal. with the note that the cost should be spread over 22, 23, and 24 budget years out of water and sewer. As yet to be determined, and an as yet to be determined split. Some of this work is sewer related.
Right, then there's a whole asset mapping for sewer, then I would say the GIS is probably 50-50, right? Because you're gonna use like the implementation of it is kind of for both. But we don't have to get into the details.
Do you want to add a dollar amount? You said as proposed. but
Oh,
There's a dollar. amount too.
Two,
well, I think that's 72, 75 might not include the double A piece. So I think we want to look at 90,000 maybe.
90.
7.5.
And it would be
Because that
87.5,
would
yeah.
be what we have here.
87.75.
87.75, sure.
87.75.
Yep.
Really saying that?
Zero.
Yeah. No,
87,750.
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe too many zeros. A motion made by a trustee yet to be disclosed to approve spending up to 87,750 over the 2022, 23, and 24 budget years is yet to be determined to generate a water system mapping and asset inventory as proposed. Let's say MRB there too. right? As proposed by MRB.
We call it this.
Okay.
Should we say from water and sewer in there? Or is that?
yes, from the water and sewer to the budgets, and as yet to be determined split
As yet to be determined split.
in the 22, 23, and 24 budget.
Okay.
Is that a motion?
I'll move that.
Questions, comments, discussions?
It will be very exciting to have that.
I agree.
I mean, eventually, the world where we have a dynamic map of all.
We have it for our streetlights. It's fantastic.
Right, but I mean, imagine vehicles, like if all of our,
Yeah.
you know, all the thing.
Real-time location,
We can watch Tom drive around.
real-time status updates.
Less concerned about Tom, more about like emergency response.
Oh, those
Yeah.
vehicles. Yeah, that's useful too.
I want to see if that fair police car. Keep.
Any other conversation, questions, comments on this piece?
Not on this, but I'll just say one real quick thing on the stormwater management plan. I just can't kind of emphasize enough how important that is. So I'm glad we're looking at it. We're looking at maybe the ARPA fund to help out. I'm particularly interested in the legislative policies, probably because my head's all in zoning right now, but it's not lost on me that like drainage and stormwater are a huge issue, especially if we're looking at additional housing in the village, additional built space. And I'm very interested to see what MRB can help us with there around how do we create policies that help us balance this thing, right? Like we need more development in the village, and we also already have a stormwater problem. There should be some way that we can bring these together, and so I'm interested in what they have under legislative policies around, you know, adding additional, requiring people to add something during building drainage easements, you know, whatever else they might come up with, fee structures potentially for improvements that would had to be made, so on and so forth. I think it's really going to be critical to marry with the zoning stuff that we're
I
talking about.
totally agree. And that's been one of my worries when we talk development too, is where's the water gonna go?
Right.
So, yeah,
I mean, when you look at it for projects, I don't remember if it's over like an acre or maybe 3 acres in size, there's a lot of state and federal requirements. That's what we saw at 46 South. They're required to do all manner of different things, but I want to know what is that treatment that scales down to someone building a small house on a lot because you can't require them to have $1 million of stormwater management, but they're gonna have an impact and it's gonna get someone else's lawn wet. So like, what can we do, right? So that's what I'm really, I mean, there's a bunch of things in here that I'm interested in, but I'm particularly focused on that right now.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion on this piece? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Thumbs up from Keith. Any opposed?
I
Right.
Should've left
Speaking
that
of
after
Keith,
we voted.
Keith and his cat, police and ETC.
we recently adopted these two siblings that were not treated nicely by a previous person, and they're very personable, maybe to a fault, as you can tell. Start with police report for August, 145 calls for service. Criminal investigations included four domestic investigations, 5 larceny theft investigations, a reported fraud, 2 harassments, 3 disorderly conduct investigations, and 2 motor vehicle crash investigations. We got a very nice piece of feedback from the school superintendent, who was very happy that Dan, our new full-time officer, was on foot around the school campus on the first day of school. And I think the whole first week, walking around on foot, saying hi to people. And so they were really appreciative of that. So thank you for Dan, who continues to do a wonderful job being on foot around the village and school district. And I don't think it's possible for him to do it with a more positive attitude. I don't think Andy Griffith was that happy walking around Mayberry. So we appreciate Dan's effort and his energy behind it. A couple other things just Chief and I have been discussing lately is that we still don't have a afternoon crossing guard in front of the school. That's still a vacancy, and there's reason to believe we may need the morning shift as well. We may be losing our crossing guard, who's been there for a long time, in the morning. So I would say if anybody is interested, that's listening, can certainly reach out to the department or Village Hall and inquire about that. It's basically just 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the afternoon, or one or the other. We have a LEAPS committee meeting coming up this Thursday. It's been a few months off for that committee, so we will be getting back together on Thursday at the back room at Little Venice. In the Dropbox, you'll see there's just something called document, very suspiciously named. That's just the official feedback I got from the DOT regarding what we discussed last meeting about their proposed changes or lack thereof. It doesn't really take into account any of the feedback I gave them based on our meeting. I don't think that's really incorporated. They just kind of repurposed what they told me over the phone. So there's that. As part of that, Chief and I continued to have a discussion about Main Street. I kind of brought him up to speed on that, and he was part of the discussion we had. You may remember when we met with the TCAT safety person. And as both of us talked, I know it has not been a popular idea, but I think he and I are both of the minds that, at least in the short term, to try it out, the removal of those 2 parking spots might very well be worth it. And I know there's always been that long pushback on lack of parking on Main Street, but he seems to feel strongly that, it's not gonna seem like a good reason to keep those spots if anything were ever to happen in those crosswalks. and maybe, I discussed the idea of maybe it being I don't know if there's a way to kind of do it as a pilot and see if there's a real issue that is created, there's a noticeable issue with people not being able to find enough parking spots or businesses are complaining. Anyway, I just thought I would bring that forward, just because it came up again after this feedback from or not feedback, but the report from DOT. We've eaten up a lot of time already this meeting, so I won't dive too deep into this, but I just we'll address it at the next meeting. But I did want to give everyone a heads up that Chief would like us to consider a third full-time officer. And we'll get into the details of why, but just as you think about it, one of the main reasons is it's just getting the part-time officers are becoming increasingly, I don't want to say unreliable. They're not unreliable officers. It's getting harder to schedule them. Some of them are wanting to go into full retirement. Some that were doing a shift as on a part-time basis from their full-time department are getting stretched thin at that department for reasons that you're all probably aware of, because there's staffing shortages everywhere in most of the local departments. And so we're getting a lot of holes in the schedule, and Chief thinks the best way to address that is to find somebody that would be full-time, and then we don't have to be doing so much patchwork. And certainly a full-time officer costs more than a part-time officer. But we got to pay for these shifts anyway. And, again, we can go to more detail in the next meeting, but there's a number of reasons why he thinks we're going to want to be available to cover more shifts in the future, or at least be in position to take care of ourselves during more hours of the day. And I'll just leave that at that. I believe that's all for police for this meeting. In terms of ETC, I know Jen Demarest met with Dusty recently about the tree relocation, and we're going to get briefed on that we're looking to schedule an upcoming meeting for September. So I'll have more of an update, I think, with regards to ETC and Winterfest at our next meeting. I will say there was a nice chamber sponsored event at the golf course last week. A lot of local businesses came together for a lunch and to discuss what's going on with their business. There's also going to be a great event on September 30th at Garage Brewing. Comedy's coming back to town. So hearing really good things about the organizer and all the people that will be at that. And
Especially the organizer.
Especially the organizer. And I will say no more. I'll take any questions.
Questions for Keith than anything police or ETC? The treasurer's office.
In the treasurer's office, we need to approve a permissive referendum, please, to pay for the third of 5 lease payments for the DPW equipment from the DPW equipment reserve for the leaf truck for up to $19,000.
So moved.
Second.
Fantastic.
Motion and a second. You'll recall a couple of years ago, we did get a new leaf truck, and it is a leased leaf truck. So and to keep our budget in line, we decided to pay for it out of equipment reserve. So that's what we're doing, but that does require the permissive referendum. Timing is good. If anybody doesn't want their leaf picked up by the leased leaf truck, then
You gotta give it tongue twister.
you can always send this to referendum.
I'm
Okay,
starting to
so
appreciate Debbie's position on leaves and large feelings. But we have the truck, we have the lease,
You know, the
and
truck.
we will be picking up leaves.
It's the much beloved leased leaf truck. So we have a motion and a second. Any other questions, comments, conversation? Hearing none, then all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Anything else from the treasurer's office?
No, moving right along on all the sort of filing for the past grant work and keeping up on regular work, which is being done by Vicki.
Okay.
It's happening on vacation.
We will move right into the clerk's office.
Excellent. We did send out water billing, right? That went out last week. And so just for your recognition, in 2 days, there are 200 pieces of water bills came through the mail to process in 2 days. So there's 876 accounts total, just sort of giving you some insight into the volume that happens there. There's been a lot of questions about the capital charge and very handily can refer to the newsletter. So I've printed out copies of that page. People can take with them or refer to them on site. And so far, there's been all the questions have been answered, but it's nice that people are noticing. Some people who are not using technology as much didn't hear about it and were wondering if perhaps there's something to keep in the collective mind for any other change that might come up. Maybe we do utilize the line on the water bill a month in advance of any other change that might come, because everyone gets their water bill and looks at that. And someone did suggest perhaps a surface mailing if there's going to be any significant change, say in 2023. Maybe it makes it into a mayor's letter or something like that. And that is that. There have been a lot of temporary permits to use the farmers market for nice family events. And so that's great. And the department heads have just been appreciative of knowing that there'll be traffic. And so we've got all of that. And then a smaller question is, there's 2 empty flagpoles on the front of the village hall. And if there isn't a special occasion, we don't use them. So we were wondering if you might consider if we should put a state flag there, a county flag there. This is obviously not a pressing issue, but we have 2 empty flagpoles, which should either just come down, or we could put
Posts on the building.
on the building, like right as you walk up the front entrance. They're like, here we are. What do we want to say to you? Yeah, and maybe they come down, or maybe we could do a state flag, county flag, do you have a Trumansburg flag? American flags, but we have.
You do have a tree flag that's not being used, I believe.
One on either side.
So you can, just to think about it, obviously, that's maybe a second meeting. And I think that's it, unless anyone has any specific questions about anything clerk-ish. Still the great supply of pens. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any items of old business? Some new business. For our second monthly meeting, I do have on my list, send me anything that you want. There's the conversation about potentially naming the footbridge. There's some new, just as a heads up, there's some new tax exemption legislation that I was informed of from county assessment. We can discuss whether we want to consider opting in or not. You mentioned the possibility of looking at a police officer. If there's anything else that comes up in between now and 2 Mondays from now, just let me know. Which takes us to our second public comment period. We have 1 member of the public still in attendance. He says absolutely not. So we will go directly into item number 11. I would entertain a motion to go into executive session to discuss personnel matter as well as matters subject to the Taylor law.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Stop the live stream.